Welcome to True Crime Confidential. Smash like and subscribe. Let's dive into the story. On June 30th, 2024, a seemingly innocent video was uploaded by a young man named Nicholas Prosper. In the video, Nicholas declared his loyalty to a fictional character, Clementine, from the Walking Dead video game series. What appeared to be a bizarre yet harmless display of fandom would, in hindsight, reveal itself to be the first sign of a much darker, far more sinister obsession. But this video, uploaded to his social media account, would be just the beginning of a disturbing, tragic story that would shock the world. Nicholas Prosper's story isn't just one of a young man who descended into violence. It's a chilling tale of obsession, emotional isolation, radicalization, and a devastating lack of intervention. It's the story of how the internet's darker side can turn a troubled individual into something far more dangerous, someone capable of murder and mayhem, someone willing to take the lives of their own family members, not out of hatred, but as part of a twisted fantasy to be remembered. Welcome back to Crime Lab Confidential. In today's case, we'll dive deep into the disturbing reality of Nicholas Prosper's life and actions, exploring how a teenage boy's fantasies, shaped by the internet and his isolation, spiraled into a horrifying tragedy that could have been avoided. This is the case of Nicholas Prosper. Let's start by setting the stage. Luton, a small town just north of London. Historically known for its booming hat industry and car production, Luton had long since lost its former glory. By the time Nicholas Prosper was born, Luton was struggling. The once thriving industries had either collapsed or moved elsewhere, leaving the town in economic disarray. Its streets were lined with boarded-up shops, and its once proud industrial complexes now lay in ruin. But what Luton lacked in economic vibrancy, it made up for in a dark reputation. The town had become known for social and political tensions, gang violence, and growing concerns over knife crime. Although the town had a diverse population, it also carried a sense of underlying anger and frustration, particularly among its youth. It's here that Nicholas grew up, a boy whose potential was overshadowed by the suffocating atmosphere of the town. In many ways, Luton itself was a metaphor for Nicholas's life, a place on the brink of collapse, where things never seemed to get better, and where even the smallest disturbances could tip things over the edge. Born on December 18, 2005, Nicholas was raised in a modest apartment in Luton, with his mother, Juliana Falcon, and his two younger siblings, Kyle and Giselle. His parents divorced when Nicholas was just 4 years old, undoubtedly left a mark on him. Growing up without a father figure, he was raised by his mother, who did the best she could, holding down a job while managing a small household. On the surface, Nicholas seemed like an ordinary teenager. He was quiet, introverted, and didn't draw much attention to himself. He didn't get into trouble, nor did he stand out in any significant way. However, his social isolation was noticeable. He was distant, often withdrawn into his own world. Teachers described him as academically capable, yet emotionally detached, someone who simply didn't engage with his peers. His silence was almost constant, and though he didn't express it, he was clearly battling something internal. Nicholas wasn't necessarily a troubled child in the conventional sense. He didn't lash out in anger or frustration. Instead, he retreated further into himself. What was more concerning, though, was his growing obsession with technology and the internet. Nicholas spent long hours online, playing games, researching, and consuming content. But it wasn't just harmless entertainment. He started immersing himself in darker, more disturbing corners of the web. And it was here, on the internet, that Nicholas began to form his twisted fantasies. We've all heard about the dangers of the internet, but Nicholas's case highlights just how profoundly the internet can shape a troubled individual. The World Wide Web is vast, offering endless opportunities for connection, entertainment, and learning. But it's also a breeding ground for obsession, hate, and radicalization, especially for someone already isolated from society. As Nicholas spent more time online, he gravitated toward violent and extremist content. He became deeply involved in online communities that glorified mass shootings and other acts of violence. His fixation wasn't just casual, it was an all-consuming obsession. He spent hours researching past tragedies, particularly infamous shootings like Columbine and Sandy Hook. He didn't just watch the news reports, he dug deeper, studying the shooters' methods, their plans, their motivations. Nicholas didn't see these individuals as criminals or monsters. He saw them as heroes, as role models. In fact, Nicholas didn't just admire the shooters from Columbine and Virginia Tech. He aimed to surpass them. His desire for infamy grew with each passing day, and he began making detailed plans to execute his own massacre. He started practicing on how to outdo the killers before him, fantasizing about the headlines, about the fame he would receive for his heinous acts. But there was one more element to Nicholas's obsession that makes this case even more disturbing. His fixation on Clementine, a young girl from the video game The Walking Dead. Nicholas's admiration for her wasn't like that of a typical fan. No. Nicholas believed that Clementine was real. She wasn't just a character in a game. She was someone he had to protect, someone he was connected to in a deeply emotional and dangerous way. In his delusional mind, Nicholas didn't just want to protect Clementine. He believed that he was her hero, someone who needed to avenge her and ensure that nothing bad ever happened to her. This fixation turned violent. If anyone threatened Clementine, Nicholas was ready to act, and he would not hesitate to take lives to save her. It all came to a head one evening, when Nicholas's sister Giselle made a choice in the Walking Dead game that Nicholas didn't approve of. For anyone familiar with the game, players are often faced with difficult moral decisions that have consequences for the story. In this instance, Giselle's choice was inconsequential in the grand scheme of the game, but to Nicholas, it was a betrayal of Clementine. This seemingly trivial event sent Nicholas into a violent rage. He believed that Clementine, a fictional character, was being harmed by his sister's choices, and it was in that moment that Nicholas's twisted thoughts coalesced into action. He began to believe that he needed to protect Clementine's honor, and that anyone who threatened her, whether real or fictional, had to be punished. On the morning of September 13th, 2024, Nicholas decided to carry out his plan. Armed with a shotgun, he first shot his mother, Juliana, in the face at point-blank range. She died instantly. Next, he turned on his 9-year-old sister, Giselle, shooting her as she tried to run and hide. His 16-year-old brother, Kyle, attempted to fight back, grabbing a knife from the kitchen, but this only fueled Nicholas's rage. He stabbed Kyle more than 100 times in a brutal frenzy before ultimately shooting him in the head. The violence was chilling, both in its execution and in its emotional intensity. Nicholas didn't kill out of rage or a desire for vengeance. He killed because it was part of his twisted fantasy. To Nicholas, these deaths were necessary sacrifices in his warped mission to protect Clementine. His family, who had once been the people he loved, were now mere obstacles to his obsession. At 5:29 a.m., the first emergency call was made. By the time police arrived, Nicholas had already fled the scene. The crime scene was a bloodbath. Blood spattered across the walls, floor, and ceiling of the apartment, a stark reflection of the horror that had unfolded. But Nicholas wasn't finished. Nicholas's escape wasn't smooth. He tried to follow through with his plan to massacre 34 people at his old school, but he didn't anticipate the logistical setbacks. He thought the schools would be locked down, but they weren't. His timeline had failed, and he realized too late that his plans were falling apart. At 6:22 a.m., Nicholas, now covered in blood, posted a pre-recorded video to Facebook. In it, he declared his love for Clementine, echoing his delusional belief that he was her protector. The video was a final chilling statement from a boy who had lost touch with reality. At 7:55 a.m., Nicholas walked toward a police car and flagged it down. His hands and clothes were covered in blood, but he was calm, almost eerily calm. The officers had no idea what had just transpired, and Nicholas casually asked them if the schools in the area were locked down. Nicholas was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. During his interrogation, he confessed to killing his family, and his twisted fantasies were revealed in full. He had been planning the massacre for over a year, meticulously preparing every detail, even forging a gun license to obtain the weapon. The details of his confession were chilling. He had planned to kill at least 34 people and end his life in a final act of infamy. He had even fantasized about sexually assaulting his sister before the murders, adding an extra layer of depravity to his already disturbing actions. Nicholas's trial sparked national outrage. How could a young boy slip through the cracks without anyone noticing? How could a family who loved him so deeply be so oblivious to his growing darkness? Nicholas was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 49 years. But his case raised questions about the role of mental health and online radicalization in shaping violent behavior. It also highlighted the importance of identifying warning signs and intervening before it's too late. The story of Nicholas Prosper is a tragic one, but it's also a wake-up call. It reminds us that obsession, detachment from reality, and unchecked access to violent content can have devastating consequences. It shows us how the internet, when used in harmful ways, can turn a troubled young man into a killer. And at the heart of this tragedy is the memory of Juliana Falcon, Kyle Prosper, and Giselle Prosper. 3 innocent lives lost at the hands of someone they loved. Their story should not be forgotten, and their loss is a sobering reminder of the impact that isolation, obsession, and radicalization can have on individuals and their families. As we reflect on this case, we are left with one question: what can we do to prevent such tragedies in the future? Thank you for watching Crime Lab Confidential. If you have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comments below. As always, stay safe, stay vigilant, and take care of each other.